Hi everybody. I actually am going to do like some, more like ghost story kind of things. With this laptop. First off, though, I do want to say a couple things first before I get into telling this ghost story. What it is with this laptop, the eyeball camera on here, it's like I forget that its view isn't that wide. I'm used to the eyeball camera that's with the the desktop computer upstairs where it's like wider and it's got like a bigger thing with it. So it's like if you ever watch any of my videos and it's like like I'm doing something with my hands and it's like off screen, it's not intentional. I'm like trying to remember that well you know, this screen or this little eyeball camera is different than the one upstairs. You know, um, I just wanted to first say that. Secondly, as far as like the impromptu restaurant review that I did just a little while ago, well, that was like one of those things where it was like, I'm like, wow, I mean, it was a complete shock, to both Tony and myself that actually happened, like it's gone. I take that back. There's a third thing. I just uploaded a video, it's, as I'm shooting this video, it's uploading right now. It's about the the rude student with the yoga instructor. Really, I mean, I feel bad for her, but at the same time, I mean, it is what it is. That's all I'm going to say about that. Now on to what I was going to talk about. I actually, and in case you haven't figured it out yet, I'm into, and I have two playlists that talk about Halloween, where it's, I'm shooting videos and stuff. I have a playlist that I just started up about Bobby Mackey's on here. I have a thing about haunted houses, stuff like that. Really, if you can't figure out that I'm into like a Halloween related kind of thing, I don't know what rock you've been under. I mean, it's like between, doing like restaurant reviews on this channel and like other things, I am, definitely into, like that kind of stuff. I know, and I can't say if it was, I got an email last year, and I don't remember offhand, in the interim if I've said anything about it. But it was a guy apparently looking at my movies and ghosties thing, because I have a second channel over here that's like that I do movie reviews and stuff on, which I'm gonna work one up here because I've watched a movie recently and I just need to get all the information on it so I can tell you correctly on it. But somebody posted a thing on there that wanted me to do a Lady Gaga review last year. Not that I ignored the guy, but it was one of those things where it's like I, don't play enough Lady Gaga to actually, do an intelligent sounding review on her stuff. It's not that, I don't like her stuff. I mean, like, I like her song like Telephone and Poker Face, but, that's about the extent of it. But, if I get around to it, I'll do that. But, on here, and I'm going to talk about this book here. It's a Kentucky Ghost by William Lynwood Montell. This is actually, as you can see, it's a very little skinny little book. It's this actually, William Lynwood Montell actually wrote like a whole bunch of ghost books, that are from Kentucky and everything. So just in case you all are wondering, I'm not the only person from Kentucky that's into ghost stories from the state. This actually is a beginning reader's book. I didn't realize it until after I bought it, got home and read it. I'm like, it's like it took me like all of like 20 minutes to carve it up. But I am going to actually read some stuff out of here because I know that like I was doing, I'm still doing the Tell Me a Scary Story thing, which is, one of my playlists. And I'm going to, of course, stick this on here, but, of course, it's, I've been yapping for, like a good about 5 minutes about everything else. What I want to do is, like I want to read, a couple of things. I'm going to read like the foreword in one of the stories out of here, and then like read another one out of here in another video. But first, I want to, of course, read the foreword and then like some other stuff. Well, here's the foreword. It says, the Kentucky Humanities Council began its New Books for New Readers project because Kentucky's adult literacy students want books that recognize their intelligence and experience while meeting their needs for simplicity in writing. The first 8 titles in the New Books for New Readers series have helped many adult students open a window on the wonderful world of literacy. At the same time, the new books, with their plain language and compelling stories of Kentucky history and culture, have found a wider audience among accomplished readers of all ages who recognize a good read when they see one. As we publish the 9th new book, we thank our authors and our readers who together have proved that new books in the humanities are for everyone. This volume was made in part by continuing assistance of the Scripps Howard Foundation through the Kentucky Post and through support from the Louisville Courier-Journal, the Moniger Schmidt Fund, and Friends of the Kentucky Humanities Council. The co-sponsorship and assistance of the Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives and the Kentucky Literacy Commission have been essential to our undertaking. We are also grateful for the advice and support provided to us by the University Press of Kentucky. All of these agents share our commitment to the important role reading books plays in the lives of people of our Commonwealth. That was written by Virginia G. Smith, Executive Director of Kentucky Humanities Council. Some of this stuff is like, like I said, you can carve it up in like, if you're a really good reader, like a matter of like minutes. Like I take my time reading some books, but when they're like really short stories and I'm like zipping through them, like I did with this book, I tell you what, it doesn't take me that long to carve it up. Because I usually like to enjoy my books like a, good bottle of wine or something. Take my time and sip slowly. Okay, here's the introduction. This is from, of course, William Lynwood Montell. This book contains 8 scary stories. All of them are set in Kentucky, and all are told to be true. They tell about death and the return of the dead as spirits or ghosts. Many readers may think that ghosts are not real. People may only imagine that they see, hear, or feel them. Whether ghosts are real or not, someone you know may believe that they are real. The main thing to keep in mind as you read these stories is that they were told as truth. The ghosts were very real to those who saw or heard them. Stories like the one in this book are told by people all over the world. Every group has its own name for the spirits described in these scary tales. Here in Kentucky, we mainly refer to them as ghosts, haunts, or haints. You will see all 3 words used in these stories. They all mean the same thing. They refer to the spirits of dead people or animals that have a strong urge to return to the land of the living. These ghosts sometimes come back to do evil. However, most of them return to aid or comfort old friends or relatives in need. The stories you will be reading are part of what is called folklore. This means that they were passed on by word of mouth from one generation to the next. Ghost stories have been told and passed on this way for hundreds of years and are still told today. The tales in this book are based on real accounts told by Kentuckians from the 1930s to the present. Some stories were taken from my book called Ghosts Along the Cumberland. Others came directly by word of mouth. I have added details to make the stories more readable, but I was careful to retain the original core of each story. I had a purpose in making the stories longer. I wanted to give you a deeper insight into the lives of the Kentuckians who told these wonderful stories. These accounts will also introduce the reader to the past. By describing old buildings and common events, they tell us much about the local history and the ways people lived back then. I also tried to make the reader hear the voices of the people who told these stories aloud. While reading Kentucky Ghosts, keep 2 things in mind. First, the stories are rich in history. Second, they tell about spirits that were very real to the people who saw them or felt their presence. While you may not believe in ghosts, most likely one or more of your grandparents did, and they told stories about the ghosts in their lives. I challenge you first of all to read Kentucky Ghosts for yourselves. Then share the stories with your children or grandchildren or the children who live around you. They'll enjoy them just as much as you do. Once you have read them, you may want to tell them to others. And who knows, perhaps you will become a master storyteller as well as a fine reader. Seriously, I do agree that, a lot of folks, a lot of times, granted, don't always, there's people that don't believe in ghosts and there's folks that do. I've yet to see a ghost. I have yet to, heard things that I couldn't explain, like as in, like this thump here or this bump here wasn't caused by the house creaking or Tony upstairs dropping something on the floor up there or something outside that, was just like a wild animal or the breeze or something. So, I've yet to see one, to be honest. But, I'm going to tell, like I said here a little bit ago, I'm going to actually read one of the stories out of here in this video and then do another video with another story in it from this book. Or I might get out, scary stories to tell in the dark, which I've got here, and, tell another story out of that one. Okay? So here's the story from this book, Ghosts of Kentucky. Excuse me, I'm hiccuping from my dinner from Renero's earlier. It's called The Skeleton Under the Old Fireplace. And I'm going to read this pretty much verbatim like I did the Yahoo story I just did. I'm an old woman, so I've had a long lifetime to hear all kinds of ghost stories. I've heard stories about ghostly coffins with dead people in them floating across the room. And people like to tell about hearing ghostly cries and screams in houses and of seeing ghost-like lights. I've even heard tell of someone dressing in front of a mirror and seeing the spirit of a dead person staring at them over their shoulder. Let me tell you the story my grandma used to tell about the nights that the ghosts made all the chimney stones fall away from the house. It took place about 100 years ago here in Lincoln County at my grandparents' old house. This house had a very large chimney. During pioneer times in Kentucky, many well-to-do families built houses with big chimneys. It is said that at one time my grandparents' house had one of the biggest stone chimneys ever seen in any house in central Kentucky. My grandmother's name was Sarah Susan Wiley. Granddaddy's name was Joe Eagle Wiley. Oh, I love to hear the two of them sit together and talk about the old times. They could tell some mighty good stories about ghosts and other things like that. The first sign of ghost trouble, Granny said, occurred about a week after my grandparents moved into the big house they had just bought. It was winter, and they were sitting around the blazing fire talking about how good it felt to be in their cozy new home. They sure liked the huge fireplace with its wide hearthstone. Suddenly the flame in the oil lamp fluttered as if the breeze had blown across the room. Indeed, it felt like a breeze. But Grandma claimed that all of the windows and doors were closed to keep out the chill night air. It was strange, and they wondered how the draft had come in. Next evening, the two of them sat around the fireplace. They talked about the day's work just ended and what they would do tomorrow. Suddenly, they heard a mournful sounding coming from the area of the open fire. Grandmother gasped and covered her hand with the palm of her hand. The hairs on Granddaddy's arm stood straight out. They both felt a spirit presence there in the room with them. With another puff of breeze, the unseen spirit left the room. They sat up late, feeling uneasy, but nothing more happened. So Granddaddy banked the embers of the fire with ashes so that the coals would still be red in the morning. Then both of them climbed in their bed across the room from the fireplace. Around midnight, Grandmother awoke and sat right up in bed. She could see a strange light in the darkness in front of the stone fireplace. Within the light, she saw the figure of a woman dressed in black. She again cupped her hand to her mouth to smother a gasp. She saw the sad face of the ghost woman only for a moment. Then it faded away into the hearthstone that covered the floor in front of the fireplace. Grandmother's heart raced wildly. Granddaddy sat up in bed, startled at the noise she had made. What's wrong, he wanted to know. She told him of seeing a ghostly lady all dressed in black. He too shook from fear of the unknown and vowed to do something about it the very next day. Tell you what let's do, said Granddaddy. We'll get old man Johnny Eberton to come stay in the house for a few weeks. That way we can go to Kansas and visit my brother Frank. If anybody can handle a ghost, old man Emberton can. Everybody says he knows how to talk to spirits. Johnny Emberton seemed to attract ghosts. Since his wife had died, he had been moving from place to place, working for people by doing farm chores and odd jobs. He was known as an honest fellow with a special talent for speaking with the spirits. He claimed that he learned how to do this from his dead wife. He had already made contact with various spirits by asking a series of knocks on the wall. He knew to ask his questions so that they could be answered with either a yes or a no. The spirits rapped on the wall 3 times if the answer was yes, twice if no. His questions were sometimes answered when the spirit appeared before him and used hand gestures or body movements to give its answers. Well, Granddaddy and Grandma went off to Kansas as soon as they could make travel plans. Johnny Emberton moved into their house, ready to begin his job of waiting the return of the ghost. He didn't know whether it would appear as a breeze, a spirit beating a ball of fire, a noise, or in some other form. Although the old fellow was not afraid, he did not look forward to meeting up with a new spirit being. One day, just before dark, Emberton built himself a roaring fire in the fireplace. He sat looking out the window, wondering what would happen that night. He wasn't scared, but he was feeling tense all over his chances of seeing a ghost. After all, no one can be calm and at peace when the spirit of a dead person is likely to appear. Suddenly, Emberton leaped to his feet. Through the window he could see that something had come out of the old cemetery down the road and was headed towards the house. As the figure came closer, Emberton saw that it was a woman dressed in a white satin gown. She was holding the ends of a white shawl over her shoulders. The woman was not walking, but floating along about a foot off the ground. It was a ghost. The old man's heart thumped in his chest. Emberton watched as the spirit creature floated closer and closer to the house. Then it floated right through the closed door, just as if the door was not there. Appearing not to notice him, the lady ghost moved silently across the room. She went over and stood on the hearthstone in front of the old stone chimney. Then another spirit dressed all in black rose up from the hearthstone and floated towards the woman in white. Sobs were made by both ghosts, broken the silence of the moment as they stood very close to each other, almost to embrace. Old man Emberton finally got up enough courage to address the 2 spirits. The 3 of them talked to each other by tapping on the wall and by making a few hand signs. He learned that the spirit dressed in black was the earthly mother of the woman dressed in white who had drifted down the road from the cemetery. After seeing the ghosts of the 2 women, Emberton began to ask people around the neighborhood about the history of Granddaddy's property. He learned that the first family that had lived there moved in about 1841. Their name was Banks, and they had built a old log house that once located about 100 yards down the road. The woman of the family had died in childbirth. Before her death, she made one final request. She asked to be buried close to the house, so she would never be far away from her husband and children. It seems that some rich neighbors bought the Banks farm. They built their new house in such a way that the stone chimney was located right on top of the woman's grave. It didn't matter to them that her remains had been buried there. After all, her corpse was 6 feet underground, and this was a beautiful spot for the house. It overlooked the grass-covered valley below. The people who built the big house over the woman's grave decided to sell it after they had lived in it only for a few months. Their neighbors wondered why they were so eager to get rid of it. No one knew that the spirit of the dead woman dressed in black had scared them into moving out. Then my people came along. They knew nothing of the corpse whose burial spot had been disturbed. They didn't know that the big house with the large limestone chimney was built over a grave. Old man Johnny Emberton wrote to grandfather and grandmother in Kansas and told them what had happened. He strongly urged them to tear away the fireplace completely and remove the hearthstone as well. They never got the chance. When they first got back home, grandmother and granddaddy were pretty nervous. Neither of them saw nor heard anything that first evening before going to bed. They were wakened in the middle of the night by a very loud noise that shook the entire house. They jumped out of bed and ran outside, not knowing what to expect. They saw that the entire chimney had fallen down and lay in a pile just outside the building. When they came back inside, they saw the heavy hearthstone too was broken into several pieces. As they stood there, scared and puzzled, a dim, ghostly light began to come from the fireplace hearth. Slowly, ever so slowly, it beamed up through the broken pieces of stone. Just as slowly as it appeared, the light faded away. Almost as if they were pulled in by the spirit, grandmother and granddaddy walked closer to the hearth. They dragged away one of the broken pieces of the heavy hearthstone. Underneath the rock was a human bone. When they removed the stones, they found more bones. The spirit of the dead woman whose remains they had covered whispered to them from a dark corner of the room, "Bury me with my daughter and the rest of the family." The very next day they buried her bones in the cemetery just down the road from the house. At last she was with her loved ones. Granddaddy built the big stone chimney and hearthstone to their original glory. No breezes nor noises or any human spirits were ever felt or seen in and around the big fireplace after that. Well, yeah, I hope you enjoyed hearing that. I mean, granted, you might not have seen my face for part of it because I was busy reading the story and stuff, but I'm going to pause here and I want to, see about drumming up another scary story for you, alright? So hang on.